shot through the chest, blinded in one eye, his leg hanging on by a thread, our hero still managed to complete his mission and pass on the vital message that eventually would save the lives of nearly 200 men. We are not talking about a valiant Tommy in the trenches, nor a dashing airman flying a biplane above the Western Front, and not even a hardy sailor of the King's Grand Fleet. Our hero today is a pigeon, and not any old pigeon, but one Cher Ami of the United States Army Signal Corps. Now, pigeons today are not the most popular of creatures. They have been called flying rats, and their reputation isn't helped by the fact that they can still carry more diseases than a rat. But in the First World War, they were seen by the men in the trenches quite differently. Cher Ami was not alone in being a carrier pigeon for the Allies. During the First World War, the American Army alone used 600 of them. It may seem strange that at this time, when radio and telephone communications were becoming the norm, that pigeons were still used to relay messages. Pigeons, however, were successful when radio was still unreliable, was easily listened to, and telephone wires were easily cut by enemy artillery. But they were not perfect messengers. If shot down, the attached message could easily be read by the enemy, and the Germans did train their machine gunners to track and shoot down pigeons. The date is October 1918. The place, the Western Front, and the American Meuse-Argonne offensive is underway. This was the largest American offensive of the war, totaling 1.2 million men. And at the time Cher Ami took his memorable flight, the Americans had already taken serious casualties. During the attack, the US 77th Division had pushed too far ahead into the Argonne Forest. 550 men of the 306th, 307th, and 308th Regiment found themselves trapped on the slopes of a hill. These men were later named the Lost Battalion, although despite their name, they were not a battalion, and despite the fact they suffered serious casualties, they were not lost. The man in charge of the stranded troops was Major Charles Whittlesey. He described the situation as being caught in a meat grinder of machine gun bullets, shells, and rain. To make matters worse for these men, they began to be shelled by their own artillery. Very soon after the first American shells had crashed down onto their position, they had already lost 30 men. They discovered they were out of effective radio range, and several messenger pigeons had been shot down. Casualties were mounting, supplies were running out, and Major Whittlesey was contemplating the desperate decision of having to surrender to save the lives of his remaining men. Taking his last pigeon, Cher Ami, he wrote the message: "We are along the road parallel to 276.4. Our own artillery is dropping a barrage directly on us. For heaven's sake, stop it." We can only imagine the desperate gazes the trapped men must have stared at Cher Ami. With their mates dying around them and no aid in sight, they must have known that their hopes, and indeed their lives, depended on this one tiny pigeon. Spirits must have been very low indeed. Major Whittlesey released the pigeon. All eyes tracked Cher Ami as he took his first few tentative flaps towards Allied lines. A communal groan must have radiated from the trapped troops as they saw Cher Ami hit by enemy fire and fall like a stone to the ground. Unbelievably, Cher Ami not only took off, but he managed to fly through the curtain of enemy fire and make it the 25 miles back to Army headquarters. As soon as he arrived, he was treated by Army medics even before the artillery was given new coordinates to concentrate on. With the American artillery now ranging on the Germans besieging the 77th Division, the 50th Aero Squadron began dropping supplies to assist the beleaguered men. This has been called the first major resupply mission by air in the history of war. Cher Ami's gallant efforts to complete his mission allowed not only the trapped regiments to be relieved, but made sure that 194 men made it back to Allied lines. Cher Ami was nursed back to health by his trainer, Captain John Carey, and returned to America as a hero. Alongside being awarded the Croix de Guerre, General John Pershing, Commander-in-Chief of American forces, wrote, "There is not anything the United States can do too much for this bird." Cher Ami passed away in 1919 due to his wounds, and is now on display in the Smithsonian Museum, and is still to this day a hallowed hero of the Great War.